And this is Gavel to Gavel, WCVW-TV's complete coverage of the Richmond City Council. And good evening once again. I'm Dick Harmon. Welcome to a special edition, something we have not done before, but we're doing it tonight. People always wonder about what do these standing committees do? When they keep hearing this committee is going to report that or this being reported to a committee, what do they do? Well, tonight we're going to show you. We're going to be broadcasting the Organizational Development Standing Committee meeting tonight of the Richmond City Council. Now, the committees meet monthly. They're comprised of members of the council who have the power to hold public hearings, solicit input from interested persons and organizations, undertake investigations within proper jurisdictional limits subject to approval of council, and enlist the assistance and participation of members of the general public. Now, tonight there's the Organizational Development Standing Committee. They meet the first Monday of each month at 5 o'clock, normally in the second floor large conference room here at City Hall. However, because tonight we're televising, they're going to be in the main council chamber. Now, what is the Organizational Development Standing Committee? Well, it's composed of all members of City Council. The president, of course, its co-chairs are President Graziano and Vice President Robertson. And this committee is responsible for reviewing the operations of every department, bureau, agency, and other unit of the city government, and for making such recommendations for operations and organizational development as may be appropriate. So what kind of a meeting have we got in store for us tonight? Well, there will be one presentation, and that's going to be on regional growth and transportation. The presenter will be Mary Doswell, the Senior Vice President with Dominion Resource, President of Sustainable Transportation Initiative of Richmond, and she's going to be talking about sustainable transportation systems for the greater Richmond area. Now, that's the only presentation we have tonight. They originally had 3, however 2 had to cancel, so that is the one presentation. Then we will get into what is the legislation. There are 5 items on the legislation, and these may end up in a block. I'm not quite sure because they all pertain to the same thing. One paper is authorizing the CAO forward on behalf of the City of Richmond to execute a memorandum of agreement between the City of Richmond and the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission for the purpose of providing accommodations to a portion of the city's juvenile detention center population. So this one, first one is Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission. It would be for up to 8 beds at a cost of $166 per day per detainee, or $1,328 a day. Item 2 would be the same agreement, but this time with the James River Juvenile Detention Commission, and this would be for up to 10 beds at a cost of $166 per bed, or $1,660 per day. Item 3 would be with the Rappahannock Juvenile Detention Commission for up to 8 beds at a cost total of $1,328 per day. Item 4 with the County of Chesterfield for temporary accommodations at the Chesterfield Juvenile Detention Home up to 10 beds, and that would be a cost of $1,660 per day. And item 5 would be with the agreement with the Blue Ridge Juvenile Detention Center for up to 10 beds, or $1,660 per day total. And so we're looking at a total of 46 beds that, as you know, the Richmond Juvenile Detention Center was closed, and so they need a place to put the detainees, and they have worked out these agreements with various centers around the state. And those will be the 5 papers we'll be voting on tonight. We'll also have board vacancies that'll be talked about tonight, and then a closed session on a personnel matter. So we'll be bringing you up through the board vacancies tonight. Now, these committees, as I say, all they can do, they can recommend for approval. They cannot say, okay, yes, we will, no, we won't, this kind of thing. They recommend for approval. That's the same with all the committees, and the final vote has to come before the entire general council, so the Richmond City Council. So how many people we'll have in the council tonight, we don't know, but all members are members of the Organizational Development Committee, and we'll be looking to see what happens as we get started tonight. So something a little different tonight. We will be back next Monday night with our regular Richmond City Council meeting, and we will go on the air then at 5:45 for the meeting is scheduled to start at 6. Tonight's meeting is scheduled to start at 5 o'clock. We're a little past that right now, but members are coming into the council chambers now, and we'll be getting started shortly. Now, these meetings are open to the public. All the committee meetings are open to the public. So if you want to come down tonight, you can still come down. And there will be a chance for input as well. But we're going to be seeing this one presentation on transportation, and that should be interesting. And we'll also find out what else is going on with the various papers that are coming before the committee tonight. So find out what's happening with these committees. Well, tonight you're going to see firsthand the Organizational Development Standing Committee. The meeting will be starting in just a couple of minutes. I'm Dick Harmon. Stay tuned.
Hey, Mary. How are you doing? I'm doing fine. Good to see you. So what are you doing? Oh, okay, good.
That's right. I know. Well, I got pulled in.
Nobody's around them. He's just being a,
Because they
just being a
don't,
guy.
right, just, yeah.
Being a guy.
We saw him at the Olympic trials and swarmed around him, but of course everyone knew because it was the Olympic trials.
Yeah. But it was really funny. She said, anyway, good
No,
to
it's
see
great
you.
to see you.
We got. All right. Well, it's good to know we got the right guy.
So what's
It's incredible.
She's still down here. She's with. Oh, I'm ready.
Years and years ago. Yeah, they also don't have, they've got just, so, right.
I filed papers.
well, I didn't check. I don't know.
She said they should talk about both.
Not like the 10, like the 10.
Anyway, we'll see.
Okay, if everyone could take their seats, we could start. All right, I'm going to ask everybody to take their seats so we can start. Good afternoon, everybody. All right, this is Organizational Development Standing Committee, and we have a special presenter today. Mary Doswell is Senior Vice President with Dominion Resource and President of Sustainable Transportation Initiative of Richmond. Is going to give us a regional growth and transportation presentation. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm the Senior Vice President of Alternative Energy Solutions at Dominion Resources and Chairman of the Sustainable Transportation Initiative of Richmond. And what I'd like to do today is to give you an overview of, we call it STIR for short, the STIR organization, how it got started, the basis for it, and then one of our primary efforts or objectives is on the electric vehicle. This one right here, down, okay. Electric vehicles, and to tell you about some of the efforts we have for the city of Richmond and surrounding areas in electric vehicles. So first of all, taking a look at a survey that was done for the state of Virginia, if you take a look at the satisfaction with the commute, Richmond does very well. We are above the statewide average. So 73% of our folks in the Richmond region are satisfied with their commute. And the length of the commute, 23 minutes is average commute, and 16 miles. So again, much favorable to the state average. And as you can look at, especially 23 minutes compares very favorably to some of our locations to the north. And we saw all of this information and realized we really don't want this to change. One of the things that does stand out, though, is our single occupancy vehicles. 88% of our commuters commute by themselves, and that is very different from the state average, where 83% are single occupancy vehicles. So just something for us to consider and look at how we might affect that. And 12%, that is, are sharing rides. Also taking a look at the growth that's expected in the Richmond and surrounding areas, 27% growth up to 2030. So this means finite roads, more people, more cars. And we look at the vehicle miles traveled, there will be an increase in congestion, decrease in mobility and access, and then also the air quality considerations, which we all are very much in this area, and we want to make sure that we maintain that. So really a new paradigm, shifting to sustainable transportation. So today, 88% single occupancy vehicle, 12% sharing rides, and what do we want to take this to? Basically start just moving that needle a little bit, where we have the single occupancy dropping slightly so that we can relieve some of the congestion on our roads. So we want an integrated system where we look at all of the options, and to do that, that really takes a large degree of planning in the region. So the STIR organization has identified this and wants to really put our efforts towards working on this integrated system. So it's a commitment, a plan, and action. So STIR was formed. So moving people in a greener way. These are the backers of founding partners of the STIR organization. And looking to establish a national model where we think of building an innovative, sustainable transportation system for our region. So these are the areas we focus on: transportation choices, moving people, and then being conscious of access and mobility and the environment. Here are our members. As I mentioned, I'm the chair, but we have a lot of folks that you are probably very familiar with. Kim Sheeler, Buck Ward, who's Segway of Richmond, and then Mark Creary, Jack Berry, Venture Richmond, just to name a few. Alicia Zatkoff, the sustainability manager with the city of Richmond, participates. So it's really a great group of people that have come together that really care about this and really want to try to put a plan in place. So far, our funding has come from our private members or our founders, and then we do have a grant recipient from Greater Richmond Chamber, and also I will talk to you more about a Department of Energy grant that we recently received. So STIR's initiatives are to educate our stakeholders, support new infrastructure, and then stimulate a region-wide movement. On the educating the stakeholders, we've had numerous meetings, Leadership Metro Richmond, Chamber of Commerce, and really specifically on electric vehicles, we have been doing a lot of work with the regional planning directors and gone around to the different boards of supervisors and of the different regions. Supporting new infrastructure, it's really about electric vehicles right now, and I'm going to go into that in quite a bit of detail as to that's where a lot of our efforts are right now. And then stimulate a region-wide movement, where our goals are 10 local governments signed on to the STIR cause, corporate ambassadors, get our fleets to pledge to buy electric vehicles, have individual ambassadors, and then working towards electric vehicles, which are really focused on the whole environmental emissions and the fuel dependence, which I'll get to. So we do have a website, and it's the projectstir.org, and we have a lot of information on our efforts and initiatives on that website. Whoops, where are we? Yes. So what I'd like to focus on, where we have a lot of our attention right now, is electric vehicles in the Greater Richmond region. So first, you may know a considerable amount, but wanted to give you a little bit of background on the electric vehicles. And this is why it meant so much to the Richmond region. There really is an urgency to get ready. We are anticipating 35 models of electric vehicles before 2013, and we are really seeing that pace. There are 3 types of electric vehicles. You have your hybrid electric vehicle, and that is purely a gasoline vehicle, but there's a battery in it, and it's used by the braking capacity of the vehicle. You do not charge. That's like the Toyota Prius. You don't actually charge it. The plug-in hybrid vehicle, you do charge it. It's good for about 40 miles electric range, and then it kicks over to a gasoline engine. That's your Chevy Volt. And then the all-electric vehicle, where there is no backup gasoline engine, and that gets a range of 100 to 200 miles and no gasoline, and that's your Nissan Leaf, your Tesla Roadster, and there are a number of other ones, the Ford Focus that just came out. So these are the new models that are planned to come out, and the Ford Focus was just introduced. We'll get into that, but Richmond is a launch city for that particular product. The reason that Dominion is interested in this is the load impacts it will have on our infrastructure. And if you look at the different types of vehicles and focus on the charging, level 1 charging is 120 volts. You can plug any of these vehicles in to an outlet in the wall, and they will charge fully. They may take a little longer, anywhere up to 8 hours. A level 2 charging is 240 volt. We think most of the charging, even at the home, will very quickly go to 240 volt. Most homes have that. If you have a dryer in your home, a dryer pulls 240 volts. And then level 3, or fast charging, is a 15-minute charge, and that is available today. It is much more costly, but that's where we see public charging facilities will have the fast charging. But if you look at the circle in the middle, you see that the Ford Focus is 6.6 kW. That is what the draw is, the capacity it pulls when it's charging. The Nissan Leaf says 3.3 there. The 2012 models are coming out at 6.6 kW as well. That's equivalent to a whole house load, average whole house load. So what that means is, if you picture the neighborhood that you live in and the transformer that you are on, and we have it sized, Dominion has it sized for your particular neighborhood, and let's say everybody in your neighborhood got an electric vehicle, because we do think there will be clustering effects, then it would double the load on your particular circuit. So this is why Dominion is very interested in off-peak charging and really trying to control and know what will happen. We can adjust for it, size for it, but we want to know where this growth will be. This is showing the hybrid vehicles. These are not plug-in electric, but this is where we have seen hybrid vehicles like the Toyota Prius in Virginia, and you can see the darker red definitely clustering Northern Virginia, and then there's a slight area in Richmond, and then the Hampton Roads area. We think electric vehicles may follow this same type of clustering or track. So that's where we have plans. So the benefits of the electric vehicles, at first it was very much on the carbon emissions, and that's where we thought the electric vehicles would take hold. On the CO2 emissions, on the left-hand side is your typical combustion engine vehicle. They give off 5 tons of CO2 per year. And if you take a look at the electric vehicle, it is about 1.5 tons of CO2. And that does take into account all of the generation that's used for, say, on Dominion's grid, the types of generation that we would use and the emissions from that generation in the calculation. Very quickly, though, the argument has gone to the fuel independence. And if we just have a 4.6% of new vehicle sales by the year 2020, which is what Dominion is predicting, that will take out close to 6 million barrels of oil. And then if you project out to 2035, 12.3% of new vehicle sales, that will take out about 91 million. So this argument of fuel dependence, if we can eliminate the use of foreign oil, then that is a reason to move towards the electric vehicles. And then one of the questions is, but how much will these cost? And very quickly, the fuel is on the left side. We converted everything to cost per mile. For a regular car, a combustion engine, it's about 20 cents per mile. For an electric vehicle, it's about a penny per mile. If you look at the total cost of the vehicles, you can see on the far right for $4 per gallon, it's at about 40 cents per mile. And now the 2 bars on the left, both for the Nissan and the Chevy Volt, are right there competitive from a total cost. So now all of a sudden, if an electric vehicle fits your driving habits, now they are equivalent in total cost, meaning what it would take to buy the vehicle and also to purchase the fuel or the electricity. They are very competitive with a regular combustion engine vehicle.
Excuse me. Yes.
Yes.
Before you get farther than that, would not the higher cost of the vehicle begin to offset the savings in fuel cost?
Well, that's what this chart actually shows. There currently is a $7,500 federal tax credit for an electric vehicle. So a Nissan Leaf would cost you about $32,500. Would cost you $25,000. A Chevy Volt is $32,500. But then the savings you get for fuel over the life of the vehicle more than offsets it. So that's what this chart shows, that actually a Nissan Leaf is, let me see, the Nissan Leaf is quite a bit cheaper. It's coming in at about 30 cents per mile when you take into account the upfront cost of the vehicle plus the fuel over the 7 years. It's actually cheaper than owning a regular combustion engine vehicle. So we actually have reached that point now with the cost of the vehicles and the fuel cost. Okay, oops, there you go. Help, can't go forward. It's not moving. Sorry about that. Locked. Oh, there we go. So it's this arrow, right? Oh. Should be the thing. The down, okay. All right, so the activities we've had so far, I mentioned we've talked to all the planning directors in the region because there are real issues with permitting, zoning for public charging facilities that you have to make sure the planning directors understand, and we have plans in place for this. We've had educational meetings. We've had demonstration projects. We have Chevy Volts, a Nissan Leaf, and we are getting at the Ford Focus. We're looking at charging technology with Nissan. And then there's a Ford and Dominion partnership. And Richmond was selected as the launch city, one of the 19 launch cities for the Ford Focus electric vehicle. We meet with the equipment manufacturers. We have local charging installations already at VCU, Science Museum of Virginia. Down on Route 64, there are some charging stations that Dominion has installed. J. Sargent Reynolds was already awarded a $750,000 grant to train auto technicians for electric vehicles. And then there's an educational grant from Ford to VCU. So a lot has been going on. However, with all that's going on and all the interest, we decided to apply for a Department Energy grant for electric vehicles. And this grant would allow us to put together detailed plans on infrastructure for electric vehicles in the Richmond region. For example, in the fan, what would you do if your fan residents wanted electric vehicles? How would they charge those electric vehicles? They don't have garages. So you could maybe run extension cords out the windows to the curb. But we have to figure out some kind of solution because we have an urban environment and we have the rural areas. How would we want to link it up to our GRT transportation system if we have commuters with electric vehicles? So all of these things need to be figured out, the permitting, the zoning. So we applied for a Department of Energy grant, and the participants or the partners are those that you see up there, and we were awarded the Department of Energy grant. STIR received $20,000 of that to actually handle some of the administration and the educational aspects. This is also about how do you educate the public in the Richmond region for electric vehicles. So to put together the strategic plan, the total budget is $1.9 million, and then the grant was for $430,000. And we will complete this in the September-October timeframe. Then that will lay the groundwork for what we should do and the actions or activities we should pursue in the Richmond region. So the key dates and deliverables, public outreach, education, and training events we are planning and putting together throughout that time period. Final reports in August. There will be a major public Richmond Electric Vehicle Initiative event. Completion date is September 30th. And out of this also will be a list of policy issues that would need to be addressed either at the local, state, or federal level that we would recommend in order to enable electric vehicles and to put in place the proper infrastructure. So our objectives are to integrate the EV policy and deployment scenarios with the regional transportation plans, hold the stakeholder meetings, update building codes and policies as necessary. You may want to adjust the building codes. Many locations in the country do that for their housing to build it right in. I think it costs $200 additional to establish level 2 charging in a home if you do it during construction versus going back and retrofitting it. Develop adoption scenario maps, list of best practices, have the permit approvals with map and database of charging stations. The Nissan Leaf has the capability on board in the vehicle to identify and tell the driver where the public charging facilities are. But it does require us inputting that information into databases, so we need a way or a mechanism to do that. Create local EV information hotline, disseminate materials, and then educate the stakeholders and the general public. This is just our organizational structure for the electric vehicle grant that we have. And then STIR's role is to hold the meetings, advise on the policies, and do a lot of the public outreach and development of the materials. The REVI work to date, we have presented to the planning directors. We have done data collection, mapping, and analysis. We actually have an agreement with GM where they give us their database of any purchasers of the Chevy Volt. and we're trying to get that with the other manufacturers. We have policies and incentives that we've mapped out that we would request, charging station ordinance, installation checklist, parking signage, should there be something standardized for EVs, for parking and charging, and then the outreach events. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, that was very informative. Are there questions? Anyone? Yes, sir, Ms. Robertson? Yes, ma'am.
That works. Thank you very much. This is exciting stuff.
Thank
Boy,
you.
you've done a lot of work, and we've not heard a lot about it, so it's really good job. Are we looking at putting together a regional plan or a plan specifically for the city?
Well, it's really for a regional plan, and we're trying to get around to the different jurisdictions to make sure they're aware of it. Chesterfield has signed on to be an ambassador or supporter of STIR, and that's the mechanism that we're drawing them in and trying to coordinate. So we really are looking to coordinate all of our activities and draw in all of these plans to have them consider certain things and look for all forms of transportation, and particularly on the DOE grant, what infrastructure is required from a regional standpoint.
And one follow-up question. In addition to the passenger cars, are we looking at transportation as well?
Well, yes, there's also commercial fleet vehicles, primarily for electric. Some of the commercial transportation, like GRTC, are looking more towards the natural gas. That is something that STIR supports. Our Department of Energy grant is primarily for electric vehicles and the planning for that infrastructure.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Hilbert?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Oswell, for coming by and speaking to us about this. Let's see, is anyone from the city on this committee here?
Well, Alicia Zatkoff, Sustainability Manager, is on the STIR organization and very active, a lot of activity for this Department of Energy grant. Obviously, it's for the city of Richmond and surrounding areas, so a lot of activity coordinating the plans with the city of Richmond.
Okay, well, and I'm not sure if, well, I'll check back with her to see if the Green Advisory Commission of the city is being advised on this, this matter as well. But thank you for
Yes, she's very much involved with it.
work. Well, that's good to hear. She's, we're fortunate to have her.
Yeah, very active.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yes, I may have missed it, but with the charging stations, just curious to know, have you worked out pricing arrangements? What could this set a poor guy back?
Actually, that's a good question, because up until not the last General Assembly, but I believe it was the one in 2011, it was actually against the law in the state of Virginia for anyone besides Dominion to establish public charging facilities, because it would be selling for retail. And actually, Dominion sponsored some legislation that was passed that would allow third parties, only for transportation purposes, to be able to sell the electricity for transportation purposes. So what that means is that anyone can put up a public charging station. They would purchase the electricity from Dominion, but it is open to how they would price that. But it is now, anyone can do a public charging facility in the state of Virginia.
They would just have to buy a block from Dominion.
They buy the power from Dominion, and then they can resell, they can price it in any way that they want, basically.
And in the home hookup, do I understand that there would need to be a 220 conversion?
Well, you can just plug it into 120 volt. That will work. It will and if you just want to do overnight charging, then you should be fine. We think 80% of the charging will be done at home, but a lot of homeowners and we feel will quickly want to move to the 240 volt, because it's 3 to 4 hours, and you can charge it. You can take advantage of, we put new pricing in place that is out there, which encourages to charge at night, later at night, and it basically would cost you 50 cents to charge your vehicle. if you take advantage of the new time of usage rates. So we think people will go to the level 2 charging, which is the 240 volt, and if you have a garage, you would need to have the wiring, an electrician to bring the wiring into that outlet. And then there are some safety standards for that outlet.
Right, sure. Thanks.
Ms. Trammell?
Thank you. One question. What happens if you lose your power?
Well, that's a good, good question. Hopefully, you've already charged your vehicle. Yeah, hopefully you've charged your vehicle. But actually, there are some backup battery packs that you can have available that are spare battery packs as well if you absolutely need to charge it right then. So they can have a little mini generator, but that is actually one of the things in this Department of Energy grant that we are looking into, as far as the infrastructure and what's required and what type of backup you would need. But yes, if the power goes out, you will not at that moment be able to charge. What you've already charged, you'll keep, but then the backup plan would possibly be some other type of portable generator that could be available. Good question. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Other questions, Ms. Newell?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the update as well. I'm very interested in whether or not their website or someplace I can look at charging stations and the types of charging stations that have been developed by folks around the country. Seems to portend possibility for some economic development. I can't imagine that it wouldn't have something that is an eatery attached, because it takes at least 15 minutes even in a charging station, according.
Right.
So are there any models?
Yes, there are. And I don't know if the New Kent rest area off of 64, Dominion has a couple of there, but I will get you some pictures. Basically, you just need an outlet, and there are some standards for handicap access, so the actual plug has to be up a certain height. But besides that, many of these charging facilities are just shells that make it look nice, because you really just need the outlet. But there are some out there, some companies, Ecotality, and some others that basically have models, and they're all, some look jazzier than others, but I will be happy to get you a website.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Tyler?
Thank you, Madam President. When you were talking about this clustering effect, and I got to thinking about my famous Grove Avenue power line, which everybody loves, and everybody asked me about when is it going to be taken down and hidden. And I think about this and the fact that that neighborhood would be a neighborhood of cluster, and I suspect. And so how are we going to handle that? What is going to happen with the...
Well, we may need some things, first of all, to encourage the off-peak charging, so we're hoping that behavior, and then that would basically balance what's on the grid. But if not, then we may need to have some upgrades, but we would try to be ahead of that and to plan for that. So we have to just monitor and see how the development goes. And as we change things out as a matter of business course, we may make that part of it to upgrade the facilities. But definitely something we'll watch and see how we can adjust that behavior for the off-peak charging.
Because one of the biggest issues that we face with the power interruption is the fact that all these lines in the first, and throughout the city, but the first district in particular, obviously is overhead, and that presents problems. And so I'm wondering if there's perhaps a ray of hope that when we get into this conversation that we look at this as a possibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This
Thank
is
you.
very informative. Okay. All right, at this time, we have a few papers before us to have discussion on, so we can vote on them Monday night. And these are all MOUs between the city and juvenile justice centers, I believe, that are now holding our children or providing for our children who used to be in the city detention center. Do you want to tell us a little about it, David?
Yes, ma'am. Madam President, members of council, I'm David Hicks. I'm the interim director of Justice Services. What you have before you are several papers that are asking for permission for the chief administrative officer to enter into agreements with several facilities that are now housing the youth that had been housed in the Richmond Detention Center before it closed. Generally speaking, for all of these facilities, we've negotiated a same rate of $166 per day, and there are some variations, minor, with the individual facilities, but those are consistent across the board. We do, however, need to ask for an amendment for some things that have just been discovered that are probably going to have to, if we get leave to amend, we're probably going to have to postpone the vote. What has happened, and we've spoken to the city attorney's office about it, when we pay $166 a day per the agreement. However, when children are then transferred or sentenced to the Department of Juvenile Justice, as they will then leave that facility and go to a state facility. At the time when they get certified, like post-trial, at that moment, there's a reimbursement that comes to the facilities of $50 per child, which would then offset the 166 and make our part 116. We have to amend the agreements to reflect that. Otherwise, obviously, we want to make sure we're not double paying. The facilities want to make sure that they're not looking like they're receiving double payment for a child. So it's a technical adjustment. It's not going to affect anything on the services, and the number of children that it will actually affect will be very small. It's just those children that are then sentenced to the Department of Juvenile Justice Services for their completed sentences. So what we would be asking today is leave to amend the memorandums to include that financial provision, and then ask for, if you could, approve with the amendment, so then it can be voted on, I'm imagining probably the 25th.
Questions? Ms. Trammell?
David, how many children is it now? How many?
I didn't look at today's count. We've been averaging about 42,
About
Ms.
42
Trammell.
children.
I don't think we've not gone over 50, and I don't think we've gone under 40 since April 27th, when we closed the facility, the Richmond facility down.
Okay, also, I want to thank you for taking the lead, and also for mentioning it to me and Marty, you know, what you were going to do, and also that you're going to attend our public safety meetings and keep us informed on the information that we need.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Mr. Hicks, I'm understanding you to say that there's no budgetary change. There would not be an increased amount in the budget that is needed. It's just a technical adjustment that has to be made. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. It's just a technical adjustment that on the affected cases will actually decrease by $50 per day the amount that has to be expended, because there'll be a state offset.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes, Mr. Hicks, that $50 adjustment kicks in when?
After the child has been committed to the Department of Juvenile Justice. So generally speaking, that's going to be after the court trial, in which they're no longer going to serve their time with the facility, but they'll be in state's custody.
So they're in transition?
Right. So that would affect a very small number of the children.
It drops by $50 while they're in transition.
Correct.
But in the run-up, it's 166.
Yes, sir.
Have we a handle on per capita the difference between the arrangement we're working with now and prior arrangement per capita?
I still don't have a number that I would like to hang my hat on. Preliminarily, I saw something Jeremy Lazarus from the Free Press wrote last week, and the number that he is utilizing is $212, I believe, dollars we had been expending under the old system. But I want to make sure I look at things first. That's the only number I've seen so far.
Which brings me to my last but final question, Madam President, if I may. I think you had expressed, I think I read it, or you told me, or something that expressed a desire to have that department audited.
Yes, sir. I've asked, I'm sorry, we forwarded the letter to the president and to the city attorney, I believe, and Mr. Marshall, that we've requested of Mr. Dalal last week, I forget which day last week.
Just
week.
want to know if we're moving forward with that.
I've not reconnected with Mr. Dalal, but we did put the request into his office.
We've gotten involved, Madam President?
Pardon me?
We have sent Mr. Dalal a request?
I believe that it's moving forward.
That's my understanding.
I'm sorry.
I believe it's moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, other questions? I just have one question, and I guess you're not giving us the, you don't have the exact figure, but it costs us approximately $212 a day per child.
That's what I read in the paper, so.
And now we'll be paying, what is that, 115?
166.
Minus the 50.
Minus the 50 in the circumstances where they're committed to the Department of Juvenile Justice. So, but our working number under these memorandums of agreement or understanding is the $166 per child per day that we're paying the individual facilities.
Minus the 50?
The 50 will only be in very rare cases,
Okay.
but on the cases when they do kick in, that's why we want to make sure it was in the agreement.
Okay.
Because otherwise, there's a chance that we could end up double paying, which we don't want to do. The facilities, since it's state money, definitely don't want to look like they're charging us for something that they can reimburse by the state. So it just keeps everyone a little neater.
Okay, thanks.
Madam President,
Mr.
I'm
Jewell?
there is one last question I wanted to ask, and having to do with the indigent parents, relatives who are trying to get transport to these facilities. Is that working? How's it working?
Seems to be working fine. We had an incident this weekend where no parents were involved, but apparently there was an accident with one of the vans that I believe Cap-Up is the name of the organization. The driver, I believe, received some injuries, but there were no parents on board. But it seems, the reports that I've gotten so far seems that, that is working. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to do an evaluation of that as we get a little further down the road, but right now it seems like it's working.
So far, so good.
Ms. Newbell?
Yes, Mr. Hicks, this may be a separate item. The transportation for the young people to court, that is not a part of the 166.
It is not. The transportation for the family members,
Not family, the individual going to court.
no. As a matter of fact, thank you, Ms. Newbill. The 166 per day fee is what we pay the facility that is housing the children, whether it's Blue Ridge or James River or Merrimack or Crater. We anticipate we're going to be bringing you something to, or Rappahannock, and obviously Chesterfield. That's for the facility, that's the housing, those are those issues. There are some extra things, for example, if the child has a prescription that has to be filled and the child does not have medical insurance or famous, we get a bill for that at the end of a period if they have to purchase a prescription for the child. The transportation, the secure transportation back and forth from court appointments, et cetera, that's handled by the sheriff's office. And we anticipate that we're going to have to figure out what the long-term accounting of that is also. Right now, the sheriff's office is picking that up as part of their overall transportation of secured individuals, part of their budget. But that's definitely an added expense, and we're going to have to make them whole for it.
Mr. Tyler?
Thank you. Mr. Hicks, good to see you. So there is an added cost, that's what I'm hearing, and we just haven't defined it yet when it comes to transportation. Because now the sheriff's department, instead of transporting across the street, is now going out X number of miles, and they're using our vehicles, et cetera, and bringing them back in.
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
One of the things, that's why I was earlier on when we were talking about what the costs were and all those numbers, that's why I always want to be very cautious, because we have to look at this holistically. and if it's 166, even if that appears to be, even if it turns out that's less than what we were paying when we were running our own facility, we still have to then add in some of these other costs. And, at some point in time, you have to quantify the inconvenience for parents, et cetera. I believe you all passed the paper last Monday, I believe, which authorized a $45,000, I believe, transfer from Department of Justice Services budget for the transportation of the family members component, and that was $45,000. So that's clearly another added expense that goes into this endeavor.
Do we have any idea what the cost was on a per diem basis for a juvenile that was detained in Richmond?
So that's the number where I saw reported from the media once. It was a $212 number. But again, as I mentioned to the Public Safety Committee, I really want to have a stronger comfort level before I represent the council what I believe that number was, when we were operating the facility ourselves.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
President, Madam President.
Mr. Hilmer?
Thank you. Madam President, thank you, Mr. Hicks. Can council, once we get the determination of additional expenses or savings here from doing this venture via these remote locations, would the administration, or when will the administration be sharing that with us? Would that be, are you doing some extrapolation of expenses after the first quarter or something of that nature? Because this could possibly require a budget amendment.
I'm sure we're going to be tracking it, and absolutely we want to make sure that council's advised of the numbers we're tracking it. I believe that discussion was preliminarily held during the budget talks when I think the request was made not to cut the budget as a result of the center being closed, because these other expenses would go in there. But absolutely, we're going to have to do this evaluation, and we will keep you advised, as we discover the numbers and try to plot out future plans. As I mentioned before, in the end of the day, once we have this data, that's when we can have the discussion on, and it has to be pretty soon, that's when we can have the discussion on our desired plans, regarding the detention of these held youth. Do we want to consider reopening our facility ourselves? Do we want to consider privatizing it? Do we want to consider remaining with one of these commissions, especially if you belong to one of these commissions? The price drops even below the 166 that we're paying. We have to matrix all this out and then add in the intangibles and then make a decision based upon that. So absolutely, we want to keep council apprised as we develop the information.
Okay, and I believe there was a hiring freeze relative to the individuals that worked here, that they could apply for other positions in the city. Has that process worked its way through yet?
Ms. Hayes is here, and I wouldn't even dream about trying to weigh in on that situation. I'm sure. Before I thought I felt a disturbance in the force. I know she was moving up on me as we spoke. So we had 72, I believe, individuals that were affected in the reduction in force, the RIF. They are in the process of that, and since I hear her clicking her pen behind me, I will gladly yield to the slide and have her answer that question.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. Joya Hayes, Interim Human Resources Director. There were 54 originally that were impacted and had the eligibility to participate in the reduction in the force. The remaining employees were either temporary or part-time employees, so they could not participate in the RIF. Of the 54, one passed away, so we had 53 employees who were eligible to participate. The closing of the positions happened this past Sunday, May 26th. Of those 54, about 40 of them actually participated by applying for positions. Human Resources has broken up that group of 53 into groups, and each consultant will be working with those particular people. We're in the process now of screening those applications. We'll have them to the departments this week. Next week, those employees will be interviewed. We expect to complete the process by July 13th. That will be the last day that they will be paid on administrative leave. By that date, they will have received letters indicating that they've received new positions, or they will receive notification that their positions are gone and they will be dismissed from the city. We've also worked with the Unemployment Commission to provide training on resume writing and computer classes, and those trainings have been completed for all employees.
All right, thank you very much. Excuse
Other
me.
questions?
Madam President,
Yes,
could we maybe ask the Finance Committee to put this on a tickler for the October meeting, that being the end of the first quarter, just to see where we are in this process of the financial end of this transaction? I think it would be helpful and extremely important for us to stay abreast of where this stands from a budgetary standpoint. There's a lot of other considerations, but we do have primary responsibility for the budget, and so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson.
Thank you, Madam President. That'll be fine. What I would suggest then is that we put it on a quarterly report.
That's right.
So that we can evaluate this over the next whatever period of time that is. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hicks? All right, now, these papers will be amended on Monday night, correct?
I'm sorry. Yes.
And then passed 2 weeks, or then voted on 2 weeks after that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if anybody has any questions, they should contact you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you
All
very much.
right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam President.
Okay, wait a minute.
One other
Don't
question.
go so
I
fast.
apologize. The existing facility, are we doing an evaluation of that to see if possibly some Richmond jail overcrowding could be alleviated through the use of this facility?
That's a good question. I know we are making sure that we secure it, and and interestingly enough, we had to put a hold on some other attempted work that was to be done there because we didn't know what next steps were. I don't believe we've had any discussion as far as whether or not it would be suitable for any use by jail overcrowding or anything like that. I guess long-term, there are a lot of potential uses, but we have to figure out some of the other things first. I haven't heard anything.
Would it be possible for us to get an update on that at the Public Safety Committee meeting in 2 weeks?
And your question is as to whether or not there's been any thought as to whether or not that facility can be used to help alleviate some of the crowding at the current city jail?
Yes, sir. And I want to also defer here. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but I'm just wondering if that would be appropriate, just so that, I'm sorry here, Madam President, to be talking across council here, but my question, Ms. Trammell, was could we get an update as to the juvenile facility possibly being used to alleviate some overcrowding at the jail? And, and I'm sorry, I should have deferred to you as to whether that could be a possibility on our agenda. And it could be a quick answer of no, we can't evaluate it yet, or no, we're not considering evaluating it.
That should be fine if David Hicks will have the information for us by then.
Okay, I guess that was my question, would that be feasible to even begin to evaluate that, or is that something that you could just reject out of hand, or?
I can't. I definitely couldn't reject out of hand. What I would ask, though, is I'm committed to come back to public safety in July. If this will hold until then, if that could be part of that report in July.
Yes, I think that's perfectly fine with me, and again, I'll defer to the chair on that. And thank you, Madam President, for your patience here and
Thank you, Mr.
late
Hicks.
question. Thank you.
That'll be
Any other, Ms. Trammell?
David, that'll be fine, because you had said July. That's fine. Or Monday in July. That's fine.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Amen.
Appreciate it. All right, we have board vacancies.
Yes, ma'am. The land use recommendations are Board of Fire Appeals, James McAllister. Do you want me to just go through one by one, or you want to?
You can just, I'm sorry, you can just read through them.
Planning Commission, David Johannes. Reappointment of Jennifer Wimmer, and the appointment of Joshua Builder. Health and Human Services recommendations, J. Sargent Reynolds Community College Board, reappointment of Rhonda Edwards, the appointment of Brenda Drew. Governmental Operations Standing Committee recommendations, Personnel Board, reappointment of Mary Jo Joseph. For the Library Board, the appointment of Daisy Weaver, Krista Miller, and David Lilliard. For the Sister Cities Commission is Faye Howard. That's the only recommendation for that one.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Does anybody want to have a discussion on any of those names?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Jewell.
Regarding City Planning Commission, I'd like to put a hold on Dave Johannes. Get into the reasons later, but a couple of weeks delay.
All right, is there any objection to sending that back to land use?
No, that would be fine. Let me say this, though. We have had no other applicants for that position at this point, so he's been holding on for several months. So, but anyhow, we're certainly willing to, hold up for a little while and see what's going on. Sure.
Okay. Let's send that back to land use, and then if it goes back through land use again, maybe it doesn't need to come to organizational development. We'll just move it forward. That way, we're not holding it up but so much.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
just a point of clarification, under Richmond Public Library Board, these are all initial appointments. These are not reappointments.
Correct. That's what it looks like. Madam Clerk, are those all new appointments?
That's correct.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
All new.
They're all new. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, at this time, can we have a motion to go into closed session? Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, is everybody all right with all the other boards?
Right, that was my
Yeah,
question.
okay, we're okay?
Okay,
All right,
good.
pardon?
What about this Daisy Weaver?
I don't know about her, I've heard bad things about her, no, just kidding.
Madam President, I
Yes,
have a
sir.
motion. I move that the Organizational Development Standing Committee go into closed meeting pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for the purpose of discussion and consideration of the performance or salaries or both of specific appointees of the City Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, back in the large conference room.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Very nice. I love that today.
And that's what happens at committee meetings. You've just been to a meeting of the Organizational Development Standing Committee. Very interesting presentation that was given as we got started about 5:15. And Mary Doswell, who is Senior Vice President with Dominion Resources and Chairman of the Sustainable Transportation Initiative of Richmond, or STIR, gave a presentation on basically how we can cut down on emissions, etc., for transportation, talking basically about the coming of the electric car and plug-in areas, that sort of thing. But very well done presentation, and I think we all probably got a lot out of that. So nothing's going to happen tomorrow. It's proposals. There are different things that have to be taken care of. But she wanted to bring the council up to date, the committee up to date on what is being done and what they would like to see accomplished. So that lasted about half an hour. Then there were 5 papers concerning relocation of the Richmond juvenile detention detainees. And these would be, as you know, they closed the Richmond Juvenile Detention Center. So what do you do with the detainees? They've got to go somewhere. Well, they have worked out agreements to place some of them at various areas, including Middle Peninsula, James River, Rappahannock, Chesterfield, and Blue Ridge Detention Commissions. The basic price is $166 per day per detainee. However, there is a possibility that amendment was brought forward by Mr. Hicks, talking about there are some cases where they will be getting some state funding as well, so it might be a little bit less. But anyhow, there's that slight adjustment, so they will have to amend this paper. That'll happen at our regular city council meeting 1 week from tonight, and then they can vote on it 2 weeks after that. So they'll amend the paper on the 11th, and then they will have a vote at the meeting on the 25th. They then got to proposed vacancies, board vacancies, and discussions on the vacancies, and they are going now into closed session, so this will pretty much wrap up what we are doing here tonight for the Richmond City Council. This has been a very interesting night. Those of you who wonder, what do these committees do? Well, tonight you got a first-hand look at the Organizational Development Standing Committee. It is the only committee that contains every member of council. As you notice, all members of council were here tonight for these meetings. Now they're going to go into closed session, discuss salaries, etc., and so forth. So they will not be coming back anytime soon. So this is basically what we are going to cover tonight. We are wrapping it up from here, and we'll be with you again 1 week from tonight. Will be our regular meeting. And that'll be the regular Richmond City Council meeting. We'll be with you at 5:45 for our gavel-to-gavel rundown of what's going to be happening. Meeting will start at approximately 6 o'clock. So we'll look forward to seeing you 1 week from tonight with the regular Richmond City Council meeting. And for Gavel to Gavel, I'm Dick Harmon. Good night.